Everybody knows that it is better to do sport or study rather than to sit all day and watch TV, but most people don't really do that. In order to understand the causes and how we can change our habits, we need to understand what dopamine is. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter which is responsible for the reward and pleasure mechanism in our brain. When secreted, it leads to motivation and mood improvement, a sense of satisfaction and pleasure, alertness, and more. When it's lacking, it leads to loss of motivation, general exhaustion, mood swings, decreased libido, and even depression. Each time we do something and succeed in it, dopamine is secreted. This neurotransmitter is important and essential for our survival as human beings. The prehistoric man needed it in order to survive in nature. It is what gave him the motivation to wander around in the jungle looking for food for several days, to chase an animal and to hunt it. When he succeeded, his brain was filled with dopamine. It gave him a huge feeling of euphoria that compensated for the effort and made him repeat the same exhausting action the next day. Evolution is centered around survival and reproduction. Therefore, in the natural mechanism of the human body, most dopamine was secreted when the prehistoric man had to climb a tree for fruits, chase an animal and hunt, or to reproduce. In fact, dopamine begins to act when something good and rewarding is expected to happen to us, even before we have received the potential reward. And that is basically what motivates us to continue and pursue the award. In nature, the excess of dopamine is problematic because if we already have dopamine, we have no reason to go and look for food or reproduce in order to get it. Also, lack of dopamine is problematic because we will lose the motivation to do anything. That is why the healthy brain knows how to maintain a balanced level of dopamine. The problem nowadays is that we are flooded with so many available things that raise dopamine quickly and effortlessly, that this mechanism in our brain just went wrong. Things like social media, junk food, chocolate, TV, porn, and more. To understand how the dopamine mechanism works, we need to understand two things. First, our body has a tendency of self-regulation. For example, if it is very cold, the body begins to shake so that it can gain heat. If it is too hot, the body begins to sweat to cool itself. A similar mechanism works in the brain. If we have an excess of dopamine, the brain realizes this condition is not normal and begins to lower its levels to return to balance. And if there is a low level of dopamine, the brain begins to raise its levels in order to balance itself. Second, the body develops tolerance. That is, adaptation or resistance due to prolonged use of drugs, medications, or addictive substances. In simple words, the body learns to become less sensitive to the effect of these substances and is less affected by them as before. Taking the same dose of the substance won't cause the same prior effect, and increasing doses are needed to achieve the same effect. For example, if I smoke a cigarette, the nicotine will increase the dopamine level in my brain. In order to achieve balance, the brain lowers back the dopamine level, and I will feel the need for another cigarette. Over time, the body develops resistance, and one cigarette is no longer enough, and I will need to smoke 2 cigarettes to get the same effect of the first one. The body again adapts quickly, dopamine drops, and the need to increase the dose rises again. Slowly, the brain adapts to high levels of dopamine. It becomes a normal state. When in fact it's affected by an external matter, as soon as I feel normal when I smoke, and discomfort or cramps when I don't, my body is actually addicted. The substance is no longer providing pleasure, but preventing discomfort. Dopamine can be released due to many positive things, like sports, finishing a book, walking in nature, passing a test, and more, and not only by destructive things such as cigarettes or alcohol. The problem is that when we have 2 options to gain it, one is available, fast, and immediately rewarding, like eating chocolate, while in the second option the reward is postponed and is achieved only after a lot of effort. Like sports, the body secretes more dopamine in the first case to get the reward as quickly as possible. So if we became addicted to cheap and fast dopamine, like social media, which are designed to give us maximum satisfaction within minimum investment, It is difficult for us to get up and improve our lives to get dopamine. Our brains are already so flooded that there is just no need to get up and work hard to get more than what is already there. When we are overwhelmed with stimuli, what gives us less dopamine and not in a quick way, we won't be motivated to do. If you eat lots of chocolate, you will have no reason to eat carrots. It won't feel tasty and sweet because your brain is used to much more intense stimulation. Therefore, it will secrete less dopamine when it sees carrots and will not encourage you to eat it. That is true for everything else. Little things that excite the average person will not excite you if you are used to a high thrill threshold caused by dopamine addiction in all its forms. Now that we have understood the problem, let's see what the solution is. Imagine that you have some kind of a remote control in which you could control dopamine levels in your brain, lower or raise it if necessary. Imagine how it would affect your life. Good news, we have the ability to moderate our consumption of those addictive substances and activate the hormones of joy, which are not dependent on anything but ourselves. This remote controller is called dopamine fasting. The idea is simple: to spend a whole day without any activities that provide dopamine easily and immediately. 24 hours without junk food, social media, gaming, shopping, sex, TV, cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, gambling, etc. This is not a grocery list. We are very different from each other, and each one of us is addicted to something else. You need to check for yourself to what you are addicted. What raises the dopamine in your brain? Basically, what is the thing you cannot do without? It could be your morning coffee, hanging out with friends, watching series, thrills. There are even some people who are addicted to quarrels and arguments. In the following week, you can do things that secrete fast dopamine only when you finish doing sport or classes, as a reward for doing something useful. You can repeat this action every 3 months. What actually happens is a format for our brain, some kind of a small restart in which the reward mechanism returns to balance, leading to dopamine secretion in normal doses. Restoring balance will give us motivation to do important things whose reward is not immediate, like studying or reading, but which can improve our life. It also reduces the desire for unhealthy habits and allows us to enjoy and get excited about small things again. Don't worry, you will still get excitement because you will still need dopamine, but instead of flipping through social media, you will gain it by achieving your goals. For example, when you read a book and come to a conclusion, or when you do homework or sports. Dopamine must be secreted. It is necessary. The question is, where will it come from? We should derive our pleasure from more meaningful things, and this will only happen when this flood of available dopamine stops for a moment. The brain will manage to rebalance itself, and suddenly even a carrot will feel sweet enough for you, and you will be surprised. Your brain will secrete dopamine when it sees one. You need dopamine to succeed in life. That's what motivates you to do everything, but you need it in a very controlled way. The pursuit from thrill to thrill, from stimulus to stimulus, is unstoppable, leads us nowhere, and never makes us feel satisfied. It just makes us chase thrills forever. After all, we will always want more and more. It will never be enough. For those of you who are not convinced, ask a cocaine addict and he will tell you where this chase led him. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you and stay tuned.